Good evening everyone and welcome to an Oz Cyclone Chasers Cyclone update for the Australian region. Tonight the 4th of February 2014. My name's Chris Nitzo. Tonight we're going to be talking about Tropical Cyclone Fletcher, ex-Cyclone Edna, a new possible low off the coast of Broome, a new possible low in the Northern Coral Sea, and the interaction between the Northern Territory low and Tropical Cyclone Fletcher. So that's a lot to get through, and on top of that we'll be doing a little bit of technical analysis on a couple of things, a couple of different waves, the MJO and also a gravity wave or a Rossby wave that is pushing through. So that gets a little bit technical, so bear with us. In fact, let's do that first. Today we've seen global computer models go very, very cold on the Australian region in terms of tropical cyclone development. Look, they're still expecting tropical low development, but tropical cyclone development is getting less likely with each model run. Now, we look towards what global scale or what macro scale patterns are happening in the atmosphere at the time, and the first thing we go to is the MJO, and we can see that the MJO is currently in a suppressed phase. That means there's less convection going on and there's actually less moisture in the atmosphere. Normally what happens in a suppressed phase of the MJO is we get a lot less mid-level moisture, and we see that in fact when I go and talk about the Queensland system later on today, that will be a very big factor in why it can't get itself going. Now, if we look at the MJO right now, 29th to the 2nd of February, that's where it was. On the 2nd to the 5th or 2nd to the 7th of February, we see that that suppressed phase starts to get over the top of the Northern Territory and into the Indian Ocean. Then as we head towards the 6 to 10 day period, so as we head towards about the 8th to the 12th of February, we see that that suppressed phase is now well and truly over the Australian region. And then as we head towards the future, so the 12th to the 16th of February, we see that that suppressed phase is now over Queensland, Northern Territory and the Coral Sea. So really folks, we're heading into a time period where it looks like the monsoon trough's robustness is coming to an end over the next 5 or 6 days. So we have still some potential here over the next few days, but after that things get very, very unlikely to form. What makes this even more likely to happen is what we call a Rossby wave or a gravity wave. Now you can see the Rossby wave here. This orange phase here shows us that we're looking at suppressed convection as well. So if we look at the Rossby wave right now, it's pushing through the Coral Sea into the South Pacific, and it's going to limit the potential of any convection to get itself going out there. That's why we're seeing models getting colder and colder and colder on the redevelopment of ex-Edna and also the redevelopment, or sorry, the development of the new tropical low in the Northern Coral Sea, which is already out there by the way. And then as we head towards days 1 to 3, which is right now, we see that that suppressed phase is starting to push through all through the Coral Sea and even into the northern Gulf of Carpentaria. And then as we head towards the 6th to 8th of February, so the next couple of days, we'll see that suppressed phase continue westwards into the Northern Territory and the Peninsula region, even extending far eastwards into the Western Coral Sea. So you can see that things are conspiring at the broad scale level. They're conspiring against the development of cyclone activity around the Australian region. Now, in saying that, Western Australia will continue to see an active phase for the next few days of a Rossby wave, but the active phase there on the Rossby wave is not as pronounced as it was over the eastern half of Australia a couple of days ago or a few days ago. So as the Rossby wave progresses westwards, it will become less and less pronounced, and you can see that here. So that's our technical analysis on the broad scale pattern. We are seeing signs there that things are going to struggle to get going, at least in terms of tropical cyclone development. Look, we're still expecting these lows that we were expecting last night. They're still going to happen, but it's a matter of how strong they'll be, and at this stage they're looking like they're going to eventually become very, very weak instead of the robust tropical cyclones we were hoping for or expecting. Okay, looking at Tropical Cyclone Fletcher, the latest from the Bureau of Meteorology on that is it is starting to track just a little bit to the west. It's more of a drift rather than a movement. It'll continue drifting west and possibly get offshore overnight tonight. If it does that, the diurnal maximum for convection over the water is early in the morning, and so what we might see is a pretty rapid intensification to a Category 1 system before it makes landfall again somewhere south of Mornington Island here, around just to the north of Burketown according to the track map, although that can change a fair bit given this error margin here over the next 24 hours. So folks, there is a chance for this thing to redevelop again. Then what it'll do is, as it pushes westwards, it's going to merge with a low coming from the Northern Territory, and then that low will stick around the Southern Gulf. Now it's going to be interesting as those lows merge, if it can get itself back over the water, whether the Bureau will call it Tropical Cyclone Fletcher again, or whether they'll come up with a new name for it, because it may be the Northern Territory circulation that is the dominant circulation when they do come together. Now I'll show you that a little bit more in some model guidance, but for now we'll have a quick look at what it looks like on radar and satellite. If we look at it the last couple of hours, it's really teetering right on the edge of the coastline here, and as soon as it tracks back over water, it's still maintaining pretty decent structure on the north side. We can see the banding still coming in here. To the south, there's very little with this system, so places like Corumba and Normanton have probably not experienced that much rainfall from it. Nor have they probably experienced that much wind from it. Look, if it can get itself over water tonight, once again, as we said, it is the diurnal maximum for convection. It can redevelop as it pushes to a southwest or west-southwest direction and then hits the Gulf again sometime later tomorrow. Look, it's not looking the greatest on satellite. You can see here the convection associated with the system. It seems to be displaced a little bit further to the north than the actual centre. So the actual centre is here, yet the convection is displaced well to the north of it. And that's probably due to a little bit of vertical wind shear. And we did say that if it keeps pushing a little bit further to the north, vertical wind shear in the central parts of the Gulf of Carpentaria were not real favourable for development. And it had to stay in this little narrow pocket down here in the southeastern corner of the Gulf. So where's this going to go? Well, Fletcher's going to go basically southwest from where he is now, and are likely to merge with a tropical low that is looking quite nice coming through the Northern Territory and moving in an easterly direction. They're going to merge, they're going to interact, possibly a Fujiwara interaction here, and from that we will get one system to be the dominant system, and they will merge towards that center point. And what will happen then is that circulation may get off the coast or it may stay onshore, and so therefore we're not quite sure of the potential for that system to form into a TC. Once again, very interesting to see whether the Bureau will try to continue calling it Fletcher if it does reform, or whether they might call it the new name, which is Gillian. And very similar to the MOGREPS model, the UK Met model, we see that pushing in a southwesterly direction. The model has it dying because of the interaction picks up the next system. So let's have a look at the next system. So if we look at the GFS ensemble with the next system, it has it pushing in an easterly direction overall, and the ensemble members then develop that one broad scale circulation and then push it in a southwest or a westerly direction back out towards the Kimberley coastline. Very interesting the trajectory it decides to take, because if it takes this more southwesterly route, it's going to bring a lot of rain into inland Northern Territory and inland WA. If it takes the more westerly option, it may reform into a TC off the coast if it can manage to get off the coast. Although, once again, remembering when we looked at the MJO and we looked at the gravity wave, both of those things will conspire against it in about 5 to 7 days' time. So let's have a look at the two systems tonight. The European has it initialized a little bit too far to the south for my liking, but it's right there in the southeastern Gulf, and the other low is here. And as we look at what happens tonight and into tomorrow, as we head towards tomorrow morning, we see that this system pushes in a southerly direction. This system starts to push west-southwest and into the inland areas by tomorrow morning. Then by tomorrow afternoon, we see that this system pretty well dies out, and this becomes the dominant system here, the Northern Territory system. As we head to Wednesday night at 10 p.m, we really see that this is no longer even really a circulation anymore, and this is now really the dominant circulation. Then as we head to Thursday morning, we have the system here developing an easterly track out towards the southwest Gulf of Carpentaria. Thursday afternoon, the system lies very close to the Gulf, and that's the error margin there. Will the system be able to get offshore and reform? Now, if it does so, by the looks of this model, it's not actually Fletcher that reforms. It's actually the new low, the NT low, that trumps it, and becomes the dominant circulation out here. So you can see here how close it is to reforming into a tropical cyclone. Maybe it might even do so. So we do have to watch it, and look, if it does reform, as I say, the chances are it may not be called Fletcher, it may be called something else. So remember, Fletcher still has a chance at reforming over the next 24 hours on his way to the southwest, but after the merge happens, we should have this low becomes dominant, and if it moves offshore, then it could be a different name altogether. In the end, folks, the wash-up for this is just monumental rainfall for the southern Gulf of Carpentaria, and I'm talking massive falls. I'm talking half a metre plus at over this period. So it's not moving anywhere in a hurry, and that's that's the key here for rainfalls. So if we look at the rainfalls over a prolonged period, starting say from tonight, if we start looking at rainfall from tonight onwards and just see how that really affects the southern Gulf of Carpentaria, you're going to see some massive falls here. So let's have a look at that. So starting tonight, we see the rainfall associated with the NT low and the Gulf and Fletcher or ex-Fletcher there. And as we head over the next couple of days, you can just see the rainfall just constantly pummels the southern Gulf of Carpentaria here for days and days. We're up to Thursday morning now. Thursday afternoon, we're heading to Thursday night now. Friday morning, look at this, just phenomenal rainfall, just keeps hitting the same part of the coast. This is unheard of the past couple of seasons. It's been amazing rainfall here. So don't be surprised if we get rainfall totals of half a metre or more over the next 4 to 5 days in this area, maybe even up to 600 or 700 millimetres in parts. So some really phenomenal rain in this area. Now, it's not until about Saturday, Sunday where the system starts to track to the southwest and in towards the WA-NT border. Okay, now let's talk about the little sneaky Broome low, and it's going to push offshore probably on the Thursday afternoon here. It's a very, very weak feature on the European model. It's right around Broome, right there on the Thursday night. As we go to Friday morning, we see the system really trying to push offshore here, not really developing into anything significant though, which is what the GFS had it doing yesterday. The European wanted to form this into a quick cyclone out here, and so I think it's coming back now to the fold with the other model guidance, and really just forms a tropical low out here well to the north of the Pilbara coastline. Really not doing much in terms of cyclone formation potential. And if we look at what the issues might be, we have one look at shear in the area. We see that shear is pretty good. It's light to moderate in the region. There's a little bit more wind shear to the north, but overall where it lies is actually pretty good. And then we also have a look at relative humidity in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, and we see some pretty dry air around it. So, and that dry air is trying to circulate in. Now remember, one of the key features of a suppressed phase, remember once again we talk about that technical stuff we talked at the start of this broadcast. One of the key features of a negative phase of the MJO or a negative phase of the Rossby wave is the fact that we have quite dry mid-levels in the atmosphere. So once again, this seems to be the biggest limiting factor for all tropical lows in the northern region over the next week or two. So this is why the global model guidance is not very keen on developing these, and it's all to do with the amount of moisture in the atmosphere, nothing really to do with wind shear. And if we do a quick comparison with the GFS model at the same time, once again we see very dry air out here in the southeast Indian Ocean, and we really see this pocket of moist air here with the associated with the low, but really that dry air is really trying to get into it, and once again really limiting its potential for development into a cyclone, at least in the medium term. Look, and even if it develops that far out, it's gonna be difficult for it to make the coastline anyway. So it is likely, even if it does form, to head out in a west or southwest direction away from the Pilbara coastline. So I don't think this one's going to pose a threat to the Pilbara coastline. It is a bit early to be saying that for certain, but look, the model guidance currently is pretty clear that it won't be posing a threat at this point in time. Over the medium term anyway, if at all. Okay, as we turn our attention towards Queensland, and we have two lows that the BOM has analysed. This is ex-tropical cyclone Edna out here. this is a new low that is just forming right now, and the Bureau have picked it up at about 14 south, 150 odd east, and it's moving east at the moment. Now, if we look at what it's going to do over the next few days, as we head towards Wednesday morning, we see the low continuing to push east, not really developing. We see Tropical Cyclone Edna, or ex-Cyclone Edna, pushing south, also not really developing. We have a look at the conditions in the Coral Sea at the time, once again bearing in mind that the biggest issue, I guess, once again in the Coral Sea is that dry air. And remember, it's always associated with this drier air, tends to be associated, not always, tends to be associated with that phase of the MJO, the suppressed MJO, and also that gravity wave of suppressed convection coming across from east to west. So once again, we have very negative conditions in terms of moisture levels in the atmosphere. If we look at wind shear values through the Coral Sea tomorrow, we actually see very good shear values out here in the northern Coral Sea. So if it was all up to wind shear, we would see this northern Coral Sea low forming into a cyclone. But unfortunately, or fortunately, there are a lot more factors in play here than just wind shear. And we see that ex-tropical cyclone Edna, which is down here, is going to be impacted with a lot of wind shear over the next 24 to 48 hours. So really not much hope if it doesn't get going in the next 24 to 36 hours. There's not much hope of it actually doing so because of that fact. Now, the Bureau do mention that ex-Cyclone Edna may become a subtropical system, and therefore it may have features of a tropical and an extratropical cyclone. So it is something we would probably be curious to see if it happens. One of the key features of that will be that it'll only have wind to the south and only have rain to the south, but really even that looks unlikely at the moment because it just sort of washes out into a trough system. This low up here in the northern Coral Sea continues to just meander about in the hope of finding some sort of good conditions to form in, but it doesn't really ever find them. And so most of the guidance at this stage pushes both ex-Edna, you can see here, and the Coral Sea low, or what's left of it, as a trough system back to the west. And really the good thing about all that is that as this trough system, and you can just see it on your screen here, and if I had to draw it in, I would draw it in here. And what you have is this trough system pushing in this direction, and so you should get some rain along the Queensland coast from it as we head towards Sunday and maybe Monday at this point in time is what we're thinking. But in terms of tropical cyclone potential, I just can't see it, just because if we have a look once again at the relative humidity values as we head towards this weekend, there's just so much dry air there are pockets of moist air, but there's so much dry air creeping into the Coral Sea during that stage. So it's really going to struggle to get any of these circulations going during that time frame. In saying that, even though the Coral Sea, the European, has a trough system, the GFS model continues to want to push a weak or moderate tropical low into the coastline. You can see its latest offering here is suggesting a coastal crossing of a low, but even that is now starting to wash into a trough system around the North Queensland coast. And the last few model runs, it's progressively started to weaken this particular system. So this is this morning's model run you're watching now. You can see it had a stronger system hitting a little bit further to the south, and if we look at last night's model run, it had an even stronger system. So you can see here progressively the GFS is picking up more and more unfavourable conditions of this particular low and really not developing it into much. Once again, if we look at the GFS humidity values over the last few, you see that the reason the GFS keeps a more robust system as it heads towards the coast is it's expecting a bit less dry air over the Coral Sea. Once again, if we look at shear values in the Coral Sea, you'll find that we've got some moderate shear on the coast, but off the coast, the shear values are pretty good. So it's really the dry air, folks, that's the killer here. And once again, that's been modelled by the broad scale pattern if we go back to the MJO and those Rossby waves we talked about at the start of the broadcast. The good news, folks, is that even if we do get that trough system instead of a low, I guess the good news with a trough system is we're going to see that rainfall more widespread, whereas with a low, the rainfall tends to be a lot more centralised, and with a cyclone, it tends to be even more centralised. So with a trough, you're not going to see heavy falls, but you're going to see moderate rainfall, especially with a nice or a reasonably moist easterly stream in the lower levels. If we take a look at the ensemble guidance from the GFS, once again it has gone cold on this being a recognised low pressure system. It is going for more of a trough type system approaching the central southern Queensland coast, but even extending into the northern Queensland coast as well. So looking at that, the ensemble guidance is now on board with an even weaker system with each and every model run. So that's on Saturday, and then as we head towards Sunday, we really see the trough even washing out. But once again, we are looking at the potential for some reasonable falls of rain. Nothing too heavy, nothing drought breaking, but at least it's some rain. For parts of the central coast that haven't seen much at all, or parts of even the central inland parts of Queensland that haven't seen much at all, this could be a little bit of a rainmaker, not a drought breaker though. We look at a less reliable model, the Access G model. We see on Saturday very weak low here in the northern Coral Sea, pushing in a westerly direction. See some showers here in an onshore stream over North Queensland. And then as we head towards Sunday, we see that system just washes out into a trough, and we see some reasonable falls of rain along the Queensland coastline from it. So look, that's probably the best thing we can hope for at this stage. Once again, if it does form into a low and just maintains its structure a little bit more, perhaps that rainfall might be a little heavier along the coast. But at this stage, don't hold your breath. There does seem to be a lot of dry air in the area. So look, folks, same thing as last night. We are expecting 5 lows. We've actually got 4 of them. We're just expecting 1 more to form near Broome. But out of those 5 now, the cyclone potential, rather than 3, looking at 3 possible, or up to 3 possible cyclones, we're probably more looking at 1, maybe 2. So that's I guess the biggest change. So what's all that look like in rainfall totals? Well, tomorrow's rainfall pretty well on the Queensland coast is confined to north of Townsville, with some of the heavier falls north of Cairns. We have some very heavy rain on the West Peninsula. We also have some very heavy rain over the central northern parts of the Northern Territory, pushing into the Kimberley region as well. The top end coast still looking at moderate to heavy falls. And as we head to Thursday, we have that very heavy rain over the Gulf of Carpentaria just continuing. It's relentless out there. We have some of that rain seeping into northern inland Queensland, and also we've got still some moderate to heavy falls, or more moderate falls along the tropical coastline, or north tropical coastline I should say, anywhere north of about Cardwell, and some lighter falls further to the south. On the western region, we see that low develops around Broome, so we might actually see some enhanced rainfall around the Broome area on the Thursday, and if not Broome itself, just a general increase in rainfall along the Kimberley coastline. On Friday, that low pushes offshore, as we've shown you, and so that takes a lot of the rain away from the Kimberley. We still have some reasonable rain over the top end coast, the northwestern coast, and once again, it's just this relentless heavy rainfall over the Gulf country. Really confined to the coast, though, according to most model guidance. Also, northern inland Queensland maintaining some moderate falls of rain. Once again, because we start to see that trough system pushing across, or a low out here in the Coral Sea, we might actually see some moderate to heavy falls now seeping through to the Cairns to Townsville area, and possibly that rainfall extending a little further to the south on the Friday. Then on the Saturday, we continue to see some moderate to heavy falls in the Herbert and Lower Burdekin coastline, pushing down to the central coast. But really, just remember that this is all dependent on that trough system in the Coral Sea, or the low in the Coral Sea pushing westwards. And the good thing about this particular model forecast is that we're going to see some rain all the way through from about Sandy Cape northwards. And so it's probably going to be a widespread rain producer if it pushes and hits the coast as a trough. Once again, Saturday, still looking at massive rain in the Gulf of Carpentaria. Geez, I'd love to see some rainfall figures from there by the end of the week. And also the tropical low out here, or tropical cyclone out here, remains well off the Pilbara coastline. Shouldn't pose a threat to the coastline at that point in time, if at all. So the total forecast rainfall for the next 4 days, pretty self-explanatory. The 4 days after that, you can see here some pretty good rain all along the coastline of Queensland. Once again, we assume that that trough system will push west, or one of those lows will push west and give the coast that much-needed rain, and all the way down the coast too, hopefully. So it won't just be limited to the Cairns to Townsville area. It'll be more widespread than that, we're hoping. Also, that stuff around the Gulf of Carpentaria continues in the 4 to 8 day period, but it also starts to push west. And once again, in the longer term, after that 7 or 8 day period, we need to watch what that low does, because it may have a potential to push off the Pilbara coastline and reform, or it'll stay inland and give the inland region another drenching. I mean, this will be a record-breaking drenching again for this area if it eventuates. So really, folks, I know there's been a lot of people that haven't had rain, but for some people, this is going to be the best monsoon that they've had in over a decade. So I know it's quite widespread in the Northern Territory. It's quite widespread over the Kimberley. I know it's not very widespread over the Northern Queensland and Central Queensland. Unfortunately, they seem to be piggy in the middle between heaps of activity in the Solomon Islands and heaps of activity over the Northern Territory, but Queensland seems to be lacking a little. So anyway, we live in hope as this trough system from the Coral Sea pushes west, and for these people up north, you're in for still more and more rain over the next week. Thanks for watching tonight. Talk again tomorrow.